Hello everyone! Hi everyone! Today we had a special Banter Blitz session in Halloween. So today you can challenge. Wait, I have the music here, I cannot focus. Kassa is actually, you can hear us now and people can hear you, Kassa. So if you, oh no, wait, people cannot hear you now. Wait, now. Hello! Now they can hear you, eh? Welcome everyone. Look, I put a lot of love for Halloween theme. Let me check. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes. Welcome everyone. We have a Banter Blitz session today in a special occasion with the number one, the one and only Kassa. So Kassa, today you are going to be accepting 3+2 challenge, right?
Okay, yeah. Happy Halloween. I think I will be accepting these challenges. So, different than last time, will they be queued up, or will I literally be hitting, will they be queued up, or will I hit the check mark on people that are sending me challenges?
They are going to be sending the challenge in the chat, and then we will have the queue, and you will actually be ready to, you will actually see the game in your board. So let me check if our one and only Ben is over there. So yeah, if I'm not, let me actually double check. This is like the live things happening now. So how is Halloween for you? Like, what do you do usually?
Yeah, no, Halloween is usually pretty eventful. PGH, let me know if the volume is still low. But yeah, no, Halloween usually the parties are really on the weekend. I feel like the day of Halloween is mainly for the kids. The parties are usually the weekend before the day of Halloween. So this past weekend there was a lot of stuff going on. On Halloween day, I don't know, like I don't know if I'm not like eating so much candy anymore, but you know, I'll put on a costume every now and then. I'm a part of a run club, and we showed up with costumes to the run club the other day, so I'm just kind of repurposing this Pikachu. So yeah,
that's going to be your costume, like the Pikachu.
Right, that's the vibe. That's the vibe today. So
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I think like Ben is saying that we will start soon. So if you are ready, I can leave you with the chat, and then we can start People in the chat, please send your challenge, send your username in the queue there. Welcome everyone. Oh, we have a lot of people there sending. Okay, awesome. So, Kassa, are you ready to have a scary games and like just kick everyone? Oh, I was about to say this. Or, no, I'm just have wonderful games. I'm saying.
Yeah, I think the first thing I just want to point out is this board, the Halloween themed board, which we're using for this. It's definitely not a board I normally play from, so this will take a moment to get used to, and I hope it's something that the viewers will also be okay with because it's different. It's very different.
Yeah, it's
So
the
we'll see how
Halloween
that goes.
theme. Yeah, so it's special for today. We will see how it goes. If it actually gives benefit to the community, I'm sorry, Casa, but we are happy about it. It's like a
Okay, all right,
handicap. But like,
all right.
if we see that it's too complicated, we can just change it back. Okay?
Oh no, I'm not. It's fine. I'm just making sure the viewing experience is
It's okay.
copacetic. That's the dynamic.
Okay, well, we will see how it goes. We will check the chat and just change if needed. So good luck, everyone. I leave you with the community there and enjoy the Banter Blitz.
All right, so it appears we're just gonna have games just pop up, and here we go against Valing 32. I'm gonna start with C4. We're gonna play English opening. It's gonna get very spooky. Oh, C5. Okay, I'm gonna go knight F3, just developing the knight. Black can still play copycat chess. H6. All right, H6 is different. It's not a great move because first of all, it's just a little bit too early. There are other things you could do, like develop more pieces, like I'm gonna do with knight C3. And also you actually inadvertently weaken the G6 square for later. So keep that in mind if that G6 square becomes a little bit loose a bit later in the game, because I might have some tactics against it eventually. When you push a pawn, you weaken the squares adjacent to where where the pawn actually winds up being. So if you play e5, you weaken d5 and f5. If you weaken play e6, you weaken these two. So just keep that theme in mind as we go through these games. So e6, okay, I can go d5 and transpose to Benoni. And I think that's a good transposition here, given that this h6 move doesn't have a ton of utility. So we'll see where that goes. I see in the chat, we got to need a drink with novelty alert. And yeah, you could say that. You could say it. I'm going to go e4, take more control of the center here. And yeah, we're gonna see where this goes. I'm just arguing. The Benoni is already kind of an opening on life support a little bit, to be honest. I've looked at it quite a bit, but if you turn on evals, if you computer evals, it usually gives it about close to +1 for white, usually like 0.8. So with h6 included, it's probably an even better version. All right, bishop g4. I'm gonna go bishop e2, just break the pin. Knight bd7. Castling never hurt anyone, so why not? And yeah, we're just gonna keep it rolling. A6, A4, no B5 expansion for black. So besides the H6 move, it must be said, all the other moves have been legit. Usually in the Benoni, the bishop is on G7 going to this diagonal, so bishop on E7 is a little passive. All right. I'm going to go h3. Can I have that bishop pair, please? Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I do like my bishops. Bishops are usually better than knights, so I'm going to try and keep this bishop. I'm not going to allow knight takes f3 to happen, and I'm going to go f4 if allowed. And one of the key features in positions where one side lacks space is they would love to trade a few minor pieces. So because the trades alleviate that spatial issue. So I'm going to go f4, kick the knight back. And you're going to see here how these pieces that black's minor pieces specifically that lack space are kind of, kind of in a rock and a hard place because it's going to be hard to maneuver around. So knight bd7, I'd love to force through e5 at the right moment, but that moment is not now. So I'm going to go bishop f3, maybe put the rook on e1 in some circumstance. And I'd love to get an e5 at the right moment, but it needs some time to build toward that, basically. And so, yeah, we'll see. My next move is going to be rook e1, maybe bishop e3 to g3. Bishop e3, f2, g3, that's the maneuver. Got to be a little bit faster. I remember last time I talked too much and then talking is good, but good chess moves are better. So G6, okay, rook E1. I don't think I still would like to aim for E5. So that's the move I'm going to be looking at on every turn, more or less. Um, like it's not quite there, but it's almost there. Especially the king on E8, there might be some tactics. Whoa, castling along. All right, so this was always going to be an option. Trying to kind of tuck the king away that way, given what I'd said about crash to in the middle, but it shouldn't work. And the reason it shouldn't work is I'm going to put my bishop on E3. I'm going to go rook C1. I'm going to try to also maybe blast with B4. And you can see with the queen and the king lined up like that, that could be kind of dangerous. See a lot of people in the queue. A lot of people in the queue. I'm always curious, so please, oblige me for a moment. Where are folks from? Where are you watching from? I'd love to know. And I'll start. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, in New York City. Where are people watching from? I'm very curious. Um, Queen B3 connects my rooks. I do like that, and it also stopped the knight from going to C4. So that's why I did that. Knight BD7. I can't help but go A5 because now this knight has to go back to A8, which is really not a flattering square at all. Um, and life is all right now because I have so much space. These pieces really are. C4 is an idea hitting my queen, but the problem is after A takes B6, I'm hitting their queen and I win a piece. So I'm gonna go for that because that does indeed win a piece. And after the exchange, you see I've won a piece. It's now rook C1 aligning this king up, rook up against the king. Knight C5 temporarily tries to address that, but now I'm going to go knight A4, attack C5 once again, taking advantage of this pin. And uh, king B8. Okay, I'm going to snag that one right there. I want to take on C5, but I also like pushing these pawns through. So I'm going to block out this bishop on E7 first by going E5 and then D6. And then my bishop on F3 comes to life. I have this really nice pawn chain. It's not connect 4, but it's connect 3. It's close. I might get connect 4. Don't tempt me. I might get connect 4. Um, and all right, so this is connect 3, and I'm hitting the bishop. And for a moment, we're going to have connect 4. Look at that. Connect 4. Not strictly the best move, but it looked cool. C5 is still hanging, so I might go for that. And if you play B6, then rook takes A6 is also there. And you can see these bishops. Okay, I'm up a piece, so, take the bishop pair with a grain of salt here, but they are putting in work here. Rook takes C5, defends the E5 pawn, and snags another pawn. And now, really, these pawns are going to win the day. But they don't have to. And they don't have to because I also have pressure on the 7th rank. So I'm going to give up the E5 pawn. And I'm looking at rook takes B7, protected with the bishop. If king A8, rook A8, A6 was mate. King C8, the rook can come this way. And now all that's left is to interpose the rook on E5 to C5. And then rook takes C5 is mate. And there you have it. We have our first checkmate of the day, first game of the day. And it's really emblematic of the idea, basically, if I could be brief for a second. H6, really, you have to develop quickly before you do anything else, and H6 doesn't contribute to that cause. The moves after that were pretty logical from Black's side, the developing moves, but that one move, that one tempo could really be a lot and kind of get you on the back foot, especially with the black pieces. You can't afford, you're already starting half move behind. So there you go. On to the next. So don't play H6 early, kids and adults. All right, Mama Kaza, D4. All right, so let's go knight F6 and check the temperature. C4, E6. Okay. I'm knight F3. Okay, I'll go D5. We have a Queen's Gambit behind. G3, the Catalan, everyone's favorite opening these days. I'm going to go C5 and go for a Tarrasch. The Tarrasch is doesn't have the best reputation, but it's actually not a bad opening, objectively speaking. Um, the reason it doesn't have the greatest reputation is because black is saddled with an isolated pawn on d5. But for that isolated pawn, you actually get a lot of activity, and that's what I'm going to try to prove in this game. White has done nothing wrong, actually. White's a little bit better, as is the norm in these structures, but bishop g5 is actually pretty early to do that. Normally you play knight c3 first, because here you're actually not threatening to take on c5 yet. So I'm actually going to toss in h6, and I think the benefit of this is that, okay, that didn't happen, but if the exchange happened, d takes c5 wasn't possible because bishop takes b2. So bishop e3 looks at my c5 pawn. Do I want to play c4 and close, or do I want to go knight g4? Both are interesting. I'm going to go c4. I'm going to take the challenge, try to play with a majority on the queen side here. When you do play c4, it becomes a 3-on-2. That's why I'm drawing this L here. It becomes or this rectangle. It becomes a 3-on-2 on the queen side, where black has the queen side majority, and white has the queen side majority over here. This 4-on-3 with this rectangle over here. So knight c3, I should castle. Definitely, I'm not going to delay that any longer. And normally in these structures, when c4 isn't played, in early b3 needs to happen to undermine the c4 pawn. Here it's a little bit different, though, because the bishop would normally be on c1 and could challenge the darker bishop with bishop a3. Here it can't do that, and sometimes there's bishop takes f6 ideas. That's also not really a thing here. So I think black has a very good version of the typical c4 positions in the Tarrasch. B3 is played anyway. Okay. All right. And normally you'd have to go queen a5 here because the bishop would be on g5. But here I can actually go bishop b4, and it might be a better move. It hits the knight. And again, I don't have to worry about bishop takes f6, which is queen takes f6, knight takes d5, which is a normal feature if this was played without bishop g5 and h6 included. All right, so bishop d2. That was a mouthful, but I hope you get the point. And now maybe queen a5 is nice, pressuring that knight on c3 again. So I'm going to do that. And yeah, I kind of like where I'm at right now. My position I have some healthy counterplay. Queen c2. Okay. Okay. I have some tactical opportunities with bishop f5, actually. Like bishop f5, queen takes f5, bishop takes c3. But I think the right way to do it is to take on c3 first, and then go bishop f5. That is an option. So bishop takes c3, bishop b takes c3, bishop takes c3, bishop f5, queen takes f5, queen takes c3. Complicated. I can also go b5 and reinforce. Decisions, man. I'm going to go b5. I'm going to go b5. The reason I like b5 is because, yeah, just kind of an active move. It reinforces the c4 pawn a little bit. Again, it was not the safest move. Bishop g4, bishop takes c3, or bishop f5 were safer, but I like the idea of reinforcing. All right, so a3. Okay, so I'm going to take on c3 now. And my idea, the extent to which I had one, was to play bishop f5 now. Is it a good idea? I'm not 100% sure, but the idea is to get a tempo on this queen, and if you take on c3, if you take an f5, I'll take on c3. Now I'm 30 seconds behind, so I gotta speed it up. It's Halloween and it's already getting a little scary. I have finally connected my rooks, albeit a little bit later than you'd like, but this is a close game. If they took with the queen, Teneric, I would have traded queens and then played on the light squares, played maybe my knight to e4, just because the bishop on c3 would have been hanging at the end. So that was probably the way to go. Again, white does have a bishop pair, which I value, but black has some control of the light square. Sorry, so queen c7, or sorry, queen c1. I need to move my queen away. I'm going to go queen a6. Yeah. Queen a6. I want to stay connected to this knight on c6. I also want to have an eye on this on the c4 pawn, and an eye on the c4 square. So b4, that makes sense. I'm going to go rook e8, line up against the e2 pawn. I should have gone bishop e4 first, and I didn't. That was probably not smart, but I'm gonna do it now. And the reason it was not smart is because it allowed knight e5. I really want to trade these light squared bishops. So yeah, once I trade these light squared bishops, these squares around the king are kind of loose. So now I'm gonna go h5 and try to take advantage of those weak light squares. All right, knight f3 makes sense. I'm gonna go queen. I'm gonna go knight e4. Hopping into the center makes a lot of sense. Again, these light squares around the king. Now that the fianchetto bishop is gone, there's a little bit of Swiss cheese dynamic around the white king. Now, my queen also would love to migrate over there and take advantage. So that's of those weak light squares. So I might go for that. So I'm going to go queen c8. Again, we're just eyeing these weak light squares over there. Maybe knight g5 comes into play. Maybe queen h3. We'll see. So, all right, so takes on e4. I'm going to take with the pawn, just because again I'm playing against these light squares, and then knight e7. And look at these Swiss cheese dynamic over here. My knight can hop into d5. It's a beautiful square, blockades the bishop on c3, and now it's about to be scary hours because I can maybe shift my rook over. I have all types of ideas now. All right, bishop d2. I'm going to go rook f6. Look at the f3 square. And look at that. I'm just locking up that side of the board. Really kind of textbook stuff there. And now I just need the other rook in position. Can I get the other rook in position as well? We'll see. But you can see how these light squares are just really, it's not it. It's not it. And you can see that just bishop on c3 is languishing behind those weak light squares. So h4, and I was hoping there's rook takes g4 tactic here, and I think it works. The idea is after queen takes g4, throwing rook h3 mate, and there was discovery check. So yeah, so they give me the queen, but again, still the light square drama persists. Look at these light squares; they're very weak. I'm going to attack this rook. Get out of my house, please. And I'm going to take more space with my pawns. And this is a little torturous and vindictive, but it just shows how dominant the light squares are in this position. So I think it's a pretty illustrative, if you will. And now my queen's going to dart in, maybe queen e2, attacking this one, and knight takes e3, taking advantage of this pin. And knight takes f1 happens to be a check. And yeah, that is a pretty, great, very interesting game. Good game, Mama Kaza. I think really you just got caught up on the light squares. You saw that once the exchange of the light squared bishops here, there was a lot of trauma on that little Swiss cheese dynamic. And that was basically the story of the game. A lot of times you need to try and disrupt your opponent's plans. As soon as I played c4, my strategy was kind of clear as far as what I was playing for with the queenside pawn majority, this 3-on-2. And there need to be a little bit more disruption there. And that once I got all my plans in, it was pretty smooth. So, all right, on to the next. I'm gonna sip some tea while we wait. Oh, it's my turn. Okay. I played c4 last time. Let's go e4. Best by test. Wasn't that what someone said? Bobby Fischer, someone good. All right, e takes d5, queen takes d5, the Scandinavian. And who wants to place bets on where the queen will go? There's, after knight c3, there's three moves that I know. There's queen d6, queen a5, queen d8. I'm going to bet on queen a5. Queen d8, wow, and a surprise upset, queen d8. Queen d8 is objectively probably the worst move out of the three, but it's been played with success even by some strong players in one-off games. I remember there was a game of the Olympiad where Magnus beat Fabiano with black with queen d8, and it was quite a travesty at the time. All right, so I'm going to go bishop c4. This is not a terrible line, but to play queen d8, you have to play this plan with a6 and b5. It's the only kind of serious try, in my opinion. All right, c5 feels early to me. I'm going to castle. I think it's a little early, but I could be mistaken. Wouldn't be the first time. bishop e7. I'm going to go bishop e3, putting more pressure on the c5 pawn. It's essentially become a French. It's a French because the bishop can't get out the structure, but it's a French a few tempos down. And I'm going to take this pawn. I think it's capturable. And what I'm arguing is that I have my rooks connected already. The side that connects the rooks first is usually the side that wins the game, so we like that. And I have an extra pawn. It's actually not so easy to get this back. So b6, I guess, tries to sack it back or trade it back, but I'm going to take again, and it's a little greedy, but it's a good move because after takes, I can actually recapture my bishop again, and then I think I'm just 2 pawns up cleanly. And it's not just 2 pawns up; it's a 3-on-0 on this side of the board because where did Black's pawns go? They're gone. So I have a 3-on-0 versus a 4-on-3. I'm about to run a fast break. I am going to run a nice little fast break. All right, so bishop e3 back. Don't want to give up that bishop. Bishop c7 is also an option, actually. Is it better? Bishop e3, knight g4 hits my bishop. Maybe bishop c7 is better. I'm going to go bishop c7 because I have bishop d6 as an idea. And maybe I can go to g3 if like knight e8 happens. So makes sense. All right, so rook a7. When you're up trade, I think this is a good opportunity to demonstrate that with bishop d6. I also could have been greedy and went knight b5, but I'm not the greedy type. I'm really not the greedy type, I promise you. All right, now I'm going to go knight b5, though, because that's a nice little tempo on the rook on a7. And maybe there's some bishop e7, knight d6 idea. I like that. I like that. Knight d6, forking the bishop on c8 and the rook on b7. And, yeah, I like that. The queen side is loaded up with unblocked running backs. You can't just let C-Mac the pawn that kind of space. You know, you're not telling any lies. No lies were told. All right, so this bishop isn't going anywhere. My knight can capture it if it goes to b7 and the a6 square is taken. So I'm going to take the opportunity to push the a pawn with a4, a5 and initiate that passer. And I'm like, do I want to trade now? Yeah, this 98 is so bad. I don't even feel like trading. It's one of these luxuries you have sometimes. You're just like, I'm gonna take on c8 and then go bishop b5, and then I'm hitting the knight on d7. So the pawn on c2 is not really hanging. And again, just this pawn is going to be really good. I have so many here that it works. It works. So knight b6, a5. The pawn continues its march. And if knight d5, maybe c4. Knight a8. Earnest blockade. An earnest blockade of the a pawn. But I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. So I'm just going to go c4. Knight e5 looks good. Honestly, the double pawns here aren't such a big deal. So I'm like, okay, we can double. If you really want to double the pawns, we can double the pawns. Knight c6, the knight comes in. If rook goes d8, knight a7 is a move, actually. Rook d7, that's a free rook. I'm going to take it. I'm so sorry, but I got to take it. Ritesh, I got to take it. And now knight e7 is a fork as well. And I'm getting a little greedy, to be honest. This is not how I was raised. I was raised to be satisfied with, just your share, your fair share, but that was free. So, I mean, if you find $1, if you find $5 in the ground, you're gonna pick it up, right? You're not gonna just leave it there. All right. Anyway, so that was an interesting Scandinavian. What happened there? So the queen d8 move is fine. If you play the queen d8 Scandinavian, you pretty much have to after bishop c4 go for this a6 b5 plan and get this bishop out of dodge. Instead, I got a free pawn and then a second free pawn, and that was the game. So really be careful. Again, making the fair trades is important, and then get your pieces out and see what happens. You will find, again, I say this all the time, you'll find the side that connects the rooks first is usually the side that wins the game, and it's happened here and it's happened in the other games, except for the first one in the Benoni. I was actually moving the pieces. I actually didn't connect my rooks first, but I had other advantages. So, all right, on to the next. All right, D4, Mr. Flanagan. I'm going to go knight F6, and we're going to see bishop F4, the London system, the dreaded London system, the system that people are like, oh no, what to do again. So there's so many ways. I'm going to fianchetto my bishop and play like a King's Indian style setup, and we'll see what comes of that. So far so good from uh from Daniel though, honestly, very legit position. Um, I'm just gonna bring my pieces to the center and see what happens. Usually here, white will try to play some A4, A5 business. Queen B3 is interesting one. I'm gonna go knight C6 maybe. You know something? E5s actually might be really strong here. And it works only in this moment. Wow. So the idea with e5 is that after takes, the bishop on d3 is hanging. And if the bishop moves away, e4 is a fork. So e5 is actually a very serious move here. So let me calculate. e5, d takes e5, d takes e5, knight takes e5, protects the bishop. Okay. And then knight h5 attacks the bishop. It's very messy, but I'm so tempted to go for it. I can't help it. I can't help it. I'm just tempted, man. I'm going to go for it. We're going to see what happens. I have no idea if this is good or not. It just looks very interesting. And I can't help but try the interesting moves. Um, Again, this is all justified by two things. One, that e4 is now a threat because the bishop is now on b7. E4 is a threat. And the d3 bishop was hanging. So bishop g5 respects my idea, essentially says, you know what, Koss, you got that one. That was maybe something I missed. I'm going to adjust course. And now, what do I do? Do I go h6? They're going to trade. Or do I do something else? I also can go knight bd7. Yeah, I'm going to go knight bd7 because I really am not particularly interested in my queen being on f6. And also there's this positional idea of playing bishop e4 and trading the light square bishops. And I think my queen would be better served replacing the bishop on b7 than having all these weak light squares. So bishop c4, okay. D5 looks very interesting here. H6 also looks, E4 looks interesting. So many interesting ideas. Yeah, I'm going to go E4 first. I like the idea of kicking this knight away off of its square on F3. I like taking space. The knight really has to go back to E1, which is not a very attractive square, and then taking it from there. I just like the space. So knight E1. Now I was looking at D5. Now D5, bishop takes D5, bishop takes D5, queen takes D5. There's a pin, but my knight can recapture, so I think I'm okay there. So I'm going to go D5 now, take more space. And space is good. Like space is in chess is a really important factor. So um, if I can kind of again put these pieces on the back foot, that's a good thing. Now the problem is I'm down a minute on the clock, but you know, I think there's increments, so we can speed it up a little bit, I think. All right, bishop takes d5. So I can take with the bishop, and I think this is a tactical oversight from white, thinking that I couldn't take with the knight, because I lose my queen, but I can take with the bishop. And even after queen takes d5, I'm going to recapture this bishop on g5 at the end. So now I'm just a piece up. So we will take that. So there are some pawns here. So there's a little bit of drama in the position, but I don't think it's full compensation or close to it. A piece is very, very valuable. White does have two pawns for the piece. And you know something, actually, when I was early on my chess development, I was someone that sacked a piece for two pawns a lot. and I didn't appreciate that the piece was more valuable. And so maybe I can illustrate now why the piece is so valuable because it is. And yeah, it makes a difference. It makes a difference. All right, I should have played f4 on the last move, disturbing this pawn structure, and I'm going to get a second chance. I'm going to do it. And the reason this is such a strong move is because now that d4 pawn is going to be isolated and weak after these exchanges here. And so it's not just about the pawn amount, it's about pawn quality. And you could see actually that the extra pawn that we're talking about white having, the extra two pawns, one is an isolated one here. And then another one is over here that I can kind of cope with, you know? So it's not like a menacing pawn majority. And I don't know. I've sacked many a piece for two pawns when I was younger, and I kept figuring, why doesn't this work? Why is this not working? Um, and it's usually just not enough. I would actually say usually you need closer to, in most cases, you need closer to four pawns to fully justify the piece. And that's how valuable pieces can be. Now, there are always exceptions. There's times when there's like you have two pawns and an attack, or you have um, one pawn in attack. But I'm saying in a really static position, usually you need more. You need more. All right, so this rook on b1 is passive. My pieces are quite active, and this knight on that was on d7 is now jumping into the fray. I love these knights here. Knights on d5 and f4, they're very active. And yeah, now my rook on d8 would love to get involved as well. So I'm going to go rook e8, look at the e5 knight. And yeah, it's the vibe. Uh, what now? What now? Oh, I gotta hurry up. I guess I'll trade. It's not the savviest thing to do, but it is a thing to do. And I'm gonna take more space and more space. And I'm gonna go knight e2 check, push the king to h1, and then take on e5. So a little bit greedy. Not the but I'm still a piece up, so all of this is fine. Trades I like. I love trades. And then I'm going to get this rook to the second rank expeditiously. And now knight g3 is an idea as well. So, and that's a mating threat. Knight g3 check, and then the rook's lining up. The pig's on the seventh to make it checkmate. Um, what happened there? Good game, Mr. Flanagan. So what happened there was the London actually did its job. You got a nice opening set up. Everything was flowing. You castled before I did. Your rooks were connected before I did. One thing I'll say though is this bishop on d3. Usually in the London, it needs to be on e2 for two reasons. One, on d3, you're basically biting on granite. This fianchettoed block here, it's not a diagonal where you're hitting anything. And then secondly, as in the game, this bishop on d3 here is actually the only unprotected piece you have. And you saw tactically with e5 how I was able to take advantage of that. So if you put this bishop back on e2, everything about your position would make sense. So cool. On to the next. All right, Tineric. All right, what about I played e4, I played c4. Let's play. I can't do it. Can I do it? Let's play b4. Let's play b4. Don't try this at home. It's not the greatest. So it's not terrible. It's just not the greatest. Um, G6. Um, I'm really tempted to do something that, again, do not try this at home, but I'm just feeling tempted right now. And it's just G4. And the idea is simply that the rook is lined up here. So G5 actually does threaten to win a piece. It's actually not as bad as it looks. It's not as bad as it looks. And the point is, you basically have to go bishop g7, and then after g5 we trade the dark square bishops, and I'm a little bit overextended, yes, but a knight on g7 isn't the most impressive thing in the world, and I have space, and space does matter at some point down the line. So I'm going to go g5. We're going to have this setup, and yes, For sure, I have, there's, it's a little suspicious looking, but I do have space. And so I'm going to try to justify that space now. Um, but black is also fine. All right, so D5, that makes sense. Hmm. I'm going to go E3. Now it's like back to modest development. Um, Bishop G4, that also makes a lot of sense. Maybe E5 is a threat. I'm going to go D4, kind of shut down the idea of E5 for now. Um, Very interesting position, must be said. Knight BD7. Maybe E5 is that threat is renewed. So I'm going to go Bishop E2, just modestly break the pin. And again, black has a totally viable position. I've definitely overextended a little bit, but it's not so hard to exploit. Not so impossible to exploit. So how would you exploit it? Well, maybe you'd think about rerouting this knight to a better square. Maybe knight f5 is active at some point. Maybe the c4 square is loose at some point. You might entertain something with the knight coming to c4 at the right moment. I don't think it was now, though. I actually don't like it now. I'm going to go knight bd2 and cover the square further. And knights on b6 are seldom good. Actually, this is a public service announcement. Knights on b6 are seldom good. I mean, think about in the Alekhine, the knight sometimes goes from f6 to d5, d6. The knight's just not very good there. It's not active there. Um, so I'm not so sure I like it. But all right, queen d7 is begging for knight e5. So the question is, do I oblige my opponent here and go knight e5? I kind of want to. I kind of want to. Decisions. Decisions. All right, I think it's actually really strong to start with a4, and we'll see why in a minute. We'll see why in a minute. I want 95 to be very timely and strong, and I think it's more timely in a moment. So my idea is if knight takes a4, there was knight e5, and that actually won a piece. A5 is very creative, but is it good? I'm going to go knight e5 now, hitting that queen on d7. We're going to trade. Oh, wait, hold on. I have a choice. I could take on d7, knight takes d7, bishop takes d1, knight takes b6, hitting the rook, c takes d6, king takes d1. That's not impressive. So I'm going to trade. I'm going to trade. The queen is still hanging. This is a good thing. Also, queen b5 check is an idea. That's also an interesting thing. And I'm starting to like queen b5 check because you can't block with c6. So queen b5, you can't block with c6 because the knight on b6 hangs. So I do have some pawns hanging, which is scary looking to be sure. But if you can't block with c6, the king has to go to f8. Not now. Maybe b takes a5, hits the knight on b6 again, and asks some very important questions, like what are you doing with your knight? So the knight now can go to d7 because that's covered. So c4 is an option, c8 is an option, f6 is also an option. I didn't consider that one. But somehow this king is very exposed. So, I'm going to take on f6 first. And now I'm looking, can I take on b6, then take on c7? It all looks very shaky. I can also just move my knight. Now I'm going to take on b6, and I'm going to take on c7 and be greedy. And now, yeah, the queen's coming to c8 to blockade. The queens are not very good blockading pieces. That must be said. Can I give a check on c5? I think I will. And what's the damage? I'm already here up something. I don't know what I'm up, but I'm up something. Um, Let me take this pawn. 96 is a move, that is true. I'm going to take on d5 as well. This has been a greedy game, for sure. Wow. All right, I'm gonna do something kind of crazy. I'm gonna go knight e4. The idea is that knight f6 is a fork, so I get my queen back. I didn't blunder my queen. And now the c7 pawn is protected still, which is nice. Because there's knight b6 check. I should have played knight b6 on the previous move, by the way. This is me panicking and time trouble. Um, it happens to the best of us. And now I have a cavalcade of pawns, which I will surely take advantage and use. I also can castle to either side still, which is kind of cool. Um, like, should I castle just to prove it? Prove that I can? Maybe. We'll see. We'll see how it develops. Yeah, I'm gonna castle. Just who castles on move 33? Isn't that cool? I think it's cool. It's not the best thing to do, but it is artistic, you know? Castling late, you know? Who we like that. I don't mind giving up my rook because I have this nice constellation of pawns. What I am worried about is my clock, and that is my chief concern. Um, Taking the exchange would have helped me, honestly, just with the trades, but now I just need to push my pawn down the yellow brick road, and we should be good. Fascinating game, though, really fast. You do not get to castle on move 33 every day, and the middle game was kind of wild. So, good game, Teneric. Um, the opening was kind of meh for sure. I think you had a good position. I mean, this is B4 and G5 is a little bit much. I think where we kind of lost the plot though is I personally would have played for E5. So I would have gone tried to play D6 and E5 and tried to play against my G5 pawn, which is a little bit weak here. And it felt that by playing D5, I got really good control of the dark squares. Again, the dark square bishop is gone, so I would try to cover the squares that I no longer can cover with the bishop. So I would have done a setup with D6 and E5 and then taken it from there. Um, and then the maneuvering with the knight, I think you had the right idea with trying to get your piece out, but still would have loved to see you castle and connect those rooks. It does matter before you engage in any active operations. And I felt like because that didn't happen, you got off on the back foot. So GG. Yeah, well, on to the next. All right. TG. It's not GG, TG. E4. Um, Anyone have any opening requests? If you answer in the next 10 seconds, I will play one of those requests in chat. The wrong cloud. Caro. Okay, I saw Caro first, so I'll go Caro. And I can't play a Dutch because they played E4, so I'll play Caro. So we have a Caro. There we go. Knight C3 is a good move, developing, protecting, and I'll play the Tartakower, which is really everyone's favorite Caro these days. And white is playing excellently. C3 and bishop D3 is the main line. Most challenging. The h7 pawn is hit rook e8 check is the move. And now here, the big revolution of the past decade, or a little less than, maybe like 5, 6, 7 years, has been this move h5, basically saying that actually things aren't so clear with h5 and h4. I'm going to go h6. It's an old move that is not considered to be amazing, but newer engines seem to like it. So the idea with h6 is you're just you're saying that the pawn is a little more secure on h6 than h5, and you're basically doing the same types of things that you do in the setup with the pawn h5, which is you go knight d7, knight f8, etc. So you spin the knight around typically, and then bishop e6 happens. Now you can't go knight g6 because bishop takes g6, but f4 is very aggressive looking. Is it good though? So does it disrupt my plan? I was going to go queen d7, but then f5, bishop d5, c4 traps my bishop. So the question is, do I go b5 or do I just do something else like queen c7? Hmm. I'm gonna go b5. I like to carve out these light squares here. Um, f5. Yep, that is the move. That is the move. And then I wanted to go bishop d5, but is it too much? It might be too much. Is bishop d5, b3, and then c4 is again a threat that's renewed. So I'm going to go bishop d7, although that's not really what I wanted to do. The one drawback of f5, though, is now there's these pieces of whites. This bishop on d3 is not impressive at all. So at least I could say that for myself. And now there is some potential with queen c7. There is some potential with queen c7, hitting the h2 pawn and, etc. But TG is definitely showing me something different. I've not seen f4, f5 in this mold. Normally, you try to get the knight to f5. You try to play against, we use that square for your pieces. So it's an interesting attempt. What does white want to do next? I'm not totally sure. I mean, you could try to play on the queen side, um, maybe with like playing for c4. You could try to trade more pieces with bishop f4. So c4, okay, that's an interesting move. Um, if I trade, I give this bishop a nice diagonal here, which I don't love. Um, it's a very interesting position. Hmm. I'm gonna go queen b8. And the idea is to look at the h2 pawn and ask a question. I'm just not so sure I want to bring the bishop to this diagonal, so I was reluctant. Bishop f4, does it walk into my idea? My idea was rook takes e2 as a tactic, and then bishop takes f4. So rook takes e2, bishop takes d6, rook takes c2, bishop takes b8, rook takes b2 is good for me. So I think this is a tactic that works for me. And it's based upon the fact that this knight on e2 is really necessary and that the queen is also hit there in the end. So I think this is actually a nice tactic where I can get two pieces for the queen, for the rook, and two pieces is better than the rook, decidedly. So, yeah. And I think everything's nice and tidy. The pawn of 5 is kind of in the way. So queen e7, I'm going to take on h2 with check and then go back to d6. And I think that's fine. Everything is covered. The bishop is covered by the knight on d7. Everything looks nice and tidy to me. And that's what we like. We like nice and tidy. Um, and yeah. And now I'm not gonna bring the bishop to c4 because it gets life on that diagonal. So I'm just gonna reinforce the b5 pawn. Um, but things are looking pretty good. All right, so bishop g3 forces the rook away from the file. And then queen c7, I'm going to stay connected to the bishop, and then I'm going to want to bring my rook to e8. And all is right in the world, in the Caro-Kann universe. Um, so bishop b1, rook e8. So normally you'd be scared of this battery, but again, the pawn on f5 is in the way, and the knight on f8 covers the square. So the bishop on b1 is not it's not as impressive as it normally be. Now I think I'm going to go h5, h4 just to kind of solidify the bishop on g3. And the value of that is it just serves to kind of make the king have back rank problems. Then I'm going to spin the knight to g5 because it's really active there and protect in a protected square. And I'm just kind of bringing my pieces to the neighborhood of that white king. And it's going to be hard because, again, this bishop is not participating in the defense at all. these rooks don't even have really great open files. Now, I mean, d5 does open, but it's a little bit too late because rook takes d5 runs into rook e1 with checkmate to follow because this bishop is basically controlling squares around the white king. So you have a situation where the pieces do have a profound impact, you know? So that's where we are. Knight g5, again, hitting this rook on f3. Still sacking the rook to rid yourself of the bishop there, but now the pawn does the same job the bishop was doing. And the queen would love to get in there and menace the white king. So queen f4, queen h4 is an idea, and queen d2 stops that idea, but it's just a temporary thing. Now my queen gets involved, and then this bishop will get involved. And finally, the bishop got to the white bishop got to a good diagonal, but it's too little, too late. And now queen e4. I'd love to get to h4. I'm trying not to trade queens. I could have traded queens on this turn or the other turn, but checkmate is imminent, so that's why I didn't do it. Good game, TG. I think you definitely had me thinking in that opening. You definitely castled quickly, which you like to see. You definitely have a good position here. It really comes down to this thing with f4. Is f4 a good move or not? My instinct tells me it's not, or it's at least a risky move, because usually your pieces are trying to play on these squares. Normally you put a bishop on f4, normally you put a knight on f5, something like that. So I'm not buying it. I'm going to check really quickly, actually. I'm going to turn on the lines here and just check. Yeah, so the computer here, my quick check, likes knight f4. Just trying to hit the bishop on e6, create a trade opportunity. And you're normally in this position, you're hoping for end games where you have a 4-on-3 here, where you don't have double pawns like I do, so your majority is easier to use. And sometimes you even get a bishop pair. So that would have been the way to go, but it was a interesting choice and definitely had me thinking. So good game. All right, on to the next. We're approaching an hour almost of this so far, but we got plenty more coming. And subwoofer bishop. So I've gone c4, I've gone e4, I've gone b4. I think it's time for d4. It's time for a normal move. And I'll play knight f3, knight f6, knight f3, e6. I'll play e3, and it's just very boring. c4, c6, knight c3. Okay, so we have a semi-Slav now, e3 semi-Slav. Bishop e7, that is not, normally the bishop goes to d6 in the semi-Slav, so that's different. I'm gonna go bishop e2. Castles, castles. Yeah, it's kind of like a weird Queen's Gambit decline with c6. And normally the pawn goes to c5 and one go in those positions, so a little bit different. Knight bd7, I'll go queen c2. And yeah, very standard position, but with the pawn normally be on c7, you go c5 and one go. Knight on b8 would sometimes go to c6 here. All right, c6. Oh, d takes c4. Okay, so if I recapture, there's b5. So I'm going to go a4. And this is the little wrinkle with playing bishop e2 instead of bishop d3, is that when the exchange happens, you don't have to recapture right away, and that prevents the whole b5 sequence. All right, so bishop d6 now. Now I'm going to take, but you see now b5 didn't happen. And I am loosely familiar with this position, actually, a tempo up, because the bishop normally goes to d6 in one move in these lines. The bishop went to e7 and then d6. So yeah, so a5, that is a move here, taking advantage of the fact that I played a4 to stop b5. Now the b4 square is weak. And then I think I can go h3. It's a little bit of a nice little waiting game here to see what either side does. So h3 is a little, because here black typically plays for e5, but then when e5 happens, this diagonal is available. So it's kind of like I'm waiting for black to play e5. And so queen e7, again, sort of building up for that. And I'm going to go rook d1. Is that okay to go rook d1? I think it is. Again, we're just both kind of waiting on this e5 move. This is really what it comes down to. Is e5 working? Is it not working? You know. So knight d5, this one is a bit strange to me because e4 is now available with tempo. And if I get an e4, e5, that's nice. But e4, there's knight b4 hitting my queen. My queen would probably have to go to e2. Do I like that? I don't know, because the knight would be quite good there. And then they could go e5 there. But then I could take a bunch and go f4. I kind of like that. So knight b4 is going to be played. My queen will shift to e2. And I think this e5 is not going to be amazing. I also have bishop g5 if e5 happens. And the point is that because the king on g8 would be pinned by the bishop, or sorry, the pawn f7 would be pinned because of the king on g8. Bishop g5 would be a tempo on the queen. So I just don't think e5 is working here. And if e5 is not working, then white has just a space advantage. So knight b6, hitting my bishop. I do not want to give that up. Bishop is going to go to b3. We already spoke in a previous game about how knights on b6 are not it. They're just not good. And I don't think this is much different. I'm going to go e5 here. I hit the bishop with tempo. The bishop has to go away. And now bishop g5. I really like hitting the queen again, which is tethered to the c5 pawn. So now the queen has to make a tough decision, or you have to play f6, which also doesn't look great, weakening the king further. And then I could take on f6, play bishop h6, hit the rook on f8 after an exchange of pawns. So I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. Now, the material is still equal. But it just feels like the king here is a little loose, and I should be able to take advantage tactically. We'll start with d takes c5. It hits the knight on c5. Queen takes is an option. Then there's knight e4 with tempo, hitting the queen on c5 and the pawn f6. So I think that's a nice start. There's also ideas of shifting the queen over so it can get to g4. That also, I mean, I can even consider that now, like knight d4 and then queen g4 is like mate, right? So the queen might have to come back anyway. But knight e4 is very tempting. And it's so tempting, I'm going to do it. So knight e4 hits the queen. I still have knight d4 as an idea at some point. I like hitting f6 and c5. What's not to like about that? And yeah, there's just active pieces, active pieces. And again, the material is still equal, but you can see the difference in the king safety is huge. All right, so knight queen e7, we kind of expected that. Um, hmm. Hmm. I'm gonna go knight d4. These knights are, look at these knights. Look at these knights as jumping in, creating chaos. The bishop on b3, hitting that king on g8 is a pin, right? f5's, I can just take it because it's still a pin. So you can't push the e or the f pawns. The knight can come to f5 potentially. The queen is also cleared to go to g4, although I don't even know if I want to go there right away. Um, Knight d5. All right, so that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. But now the knight can maybe come to b5, perhaps. I like that. It looks nice. I like knight b5. I look at the bishop on c7. Um, it's look bishop on b8. Now the rooks, are they connected? Not really. Um, I'd love to transfer a rook over, but we'll play rook c1 and just again keep improving. If you don't see a tactic, you just keep improving your pieces. Something good will happen, I promise. It's just how chess works. So b6, okay. I want to shift the pieces over. I want to shift a rook over. I'm going to go rook c4. I'm looking to get to g4. That's my dream. Bishop b7. Okay. I'm going to go knight g3 maybe. No, I'm going to go queen h5. That looks really very dangerous. Queen f6. Queen h4. I don't want to trade yet. Oh, I'm down on time. I got to hurry up. Hold on. That's a fork. Now I'm pre-moving, you see? See what this has done to me? And now rook g4. Finally, I got the transfer I wanted. That's what I was looking for the whole time. I finally got it, and now pieces are starting to hang. And I'm up a queen, essentially. So this is a little bit of window dressing, just putting the queen on g6. And now we're going to give up the rook. And get the other one there, and that's checkmate. So good game, Subwoofer Bishop. Definitely tried to flag me at the end there, which is allowed. You are more than allowed to try to flag me. So I welcome it with open arms. We are in a new era where that is more than reasonable. It really came down to, honestly, it was a semi-Slav position, but you played bishop e6, bishop e7. The bishop should be on d6 in these structures, and you normally bring out the knights first. So you bring the knight to d7, and then you go bishop d6, and you basically did that more or less, except you lost the tempo with bishop e7 and d6. And this is a theoretical position, a tempo down, essentially. Still maybe playable, but not as good. And then the real mistake here was knight d5, because it's all about playing e5 for you. And by playing knight d5, e5 no longer made much sense, because after e5, I had this bishop g5 move. So once you had to resort to putting the knights here and not getting an e5, white is in the driver's seat, and that was basically the ball game. So definitely consider playing for e5 in the structure that we got in the game. Sometimes c5 is a thing in the semi-Slav, but usually you are, normally you're looking at this e5 break. All right. Who we got next? Let's sip some tea while I have a moment. Zwell up. All right, e4. So I did Caro-Kann before. Anyone have any other requests? Open for business. Sicilian, French. Okay, Sicilian. Okay. Any specific requests from which Sicilian? A3. Is this like a wing gambit type of thing? Um, hmm. I'm gonna go knight f6 and attack this pawn. I'm gonna treat it like a c3 Sicilian. a3 is crazy. It's playable. Everything is playable. It's just different. All right, knight c3. Okay, I'm gonna go knight c6. This actually does make b4 a legitimate move, to be honest. All right, bishop c4. All right, now e6. Yeah, if someone plays an early bishop c4 in the Sicilian, normally you want to play e6. You blunt the bishop scope looking at f7. You also make d5 a really legit move in certain circumstances. So, like now. So d5 looks really good to me. I can take more space if I want to. The bishop on a2 is not that impressive. I see the point of a3 now. The bishop did have that square, but it's kind of like the a6 move, or excuse me, the h6 move that we saw in the very first game of this session in the Benoni, where it's like, do you really have time for all of that? I'm not buying it. So, yeah, d4 is an idea, already kicking the knight. Now, if I do play d4, the bishop on a2 does get life, so I might just keep the pawns like this, honestly. D3 is actually an interesting move, because now if bishop g5, it makes the pawn on d5 looser. So guess what? It's not the craziest thing in the world to play h6 here, and I'm going to do it just because it's so important that I keep this bishop blocked out. So bishop e7, castles, castles, and I'm a little bit better because I have more space, but flex okay. All right, so bishop g4 pinning makes sense to me. Knight d4 becomes an idea. I think h3 is obligatory here to attack my bishop and ask that question. And then I probably will insist on the pin, to be honest with you. But I don't have to. But I might insist. Sometimes you have to insist. All right, so bishop f4. Now knight d4 looks really annoying because I add more pressure to the pin, and it's not so easy to deal with without seriously fractioning your structure. So Yeah. Oh, happy Diwali. Okay, okay. Happy Diwali and happy Halloween, but happy Diwali. Okay. See, I got this Pikachu hat on. This is the extent of my costume today. Um, and we have these Halloween pieces. By the way, how do folks feel about the Halloween pieces? I'm dying to know. Please let me know. How do you feel? Talk to me. Let the people know. All right, so bishop e5. This is an interesting idea. If the f6 knight is gone, the d5 pawn is available. So that's a serious thing. So I can give up the d5 pawn if I want to go tactical. I don't see it. Bishop takes f3, g takes f3, queen d7, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6. I don't know. So bishop or knight? Hmm. I'm gonna take with it. I do think this knight on d4 has something to say. So I'm going to go for queen d7, and it's a very weird thing. I'm basically saying, here, bishop, get back into the game, take my pawn. But I'm going to argue that the king safety is now the new feature. So that's why I'm giving up my bishop. I'm even giving out the pawn d5, because I'm arguing that the king safety is going to hurt somewhere. Who knows if I'm right? I might be wrong. And I'm immediately threatening queen h3, by the way. So queen h3, knight f3 is almost curtains. So, or sometimes even queen f5, knight f3 as well. So that's kind of what I'm angling for. Uh, okay, so people love the Halloween pieces. Okay, okay, people. All right, so the verdict is in. People love the Halloween pieces. All right, gotcha. Well, that's good. That's good. Um, all right, so the knight on c3 is now attacked because they took on d4. That was not what I expected. It does mean I get to keep my pawns here. And to be honest, I think it makes my life a little bit easier because now this bishop is just in jail. And yeah, I mean, just these double pawns aren't really a weakness because they're restricting white's pawns to a degree and they're controlling a lot of central squares. So I rock with that. So now this 9g3, I would love to target. I'm gonna go h5, try to go for h4. Because I want this square for my queen potentially. Queen f5, queen g5, stuff like that. If h4, I would have gone queen h3. So rook e5, okay, trying to insist on getting the knight somewhere good. And I'm going to be like, nah, that knight's staying right where it is. I do not want to allow the knight to jump anywhere fancy. f4. Can I go bishop d6 back? I like that. And then take this one. Take the pawn f4. This rook on g5 is in no man's land. And you got to switch plans. I was trying to play for h4, but then everything got a little exposed. Then I switched it up. Uh, I'm going to take that. And I'm going to go knight g4. Just keeping everything nice and tidy. I do not want to give up the d5 pawn yet, so I'm going to go rook d8. And now I'm going to go rook e8. I'm going to recapture the queen so that I have queen e1 at the end. And now I'm going to go h4. This knight can move as well. Everything must go. And now knight e5, hitting this queen with tempo. And now queen g4. I'm going to trade queens. I'm getting a little bit low on time. I don't love that. And um, yeah, well, when you're low on times, oh, this knight on e2 is hanging. And I'm going to take that pawn on f2. And I'm gonna take that pawn d3. I'm saying I'm gonna take a lot. This is actually kind of getting a little gluttonous. I'm again not usually this greedy. I'm gonna give a check on e5, king g7, and now I have checkmating patterns. If this rook moves, yep, rook f3. No, I blundered my knight. I should have defended it first. All right, it wound up being the last move in the game, but not the greatest. Here, I should have started with rook e8 and then rook f3 as mate. Even after blundering my knight, I have more than enough material to win. And actually, it would still probably be mate in a few moves. But the broader point was that a3 here, so early in the opening, is just not neat and so necessary. Instead, it'd be better to just develop, castle, connect your rooks and so on. And I want to see people do that. So if you can, basically get your pieces out, connect your rooks, good things happen. Oh, so hold on. So I'm reading in the chat. Rook e4 is mate in one. It was. I was looking at rook f3 the whole time, but rook e4 is indeed mate in one. And it was actually mate in one for two moves. It was mate in one after king g7 too. It's one of those blindnesses when you see one pattern and you stick to it. I was constantly looking at the rook f3 pattern. So wait, how many moves was this mate in one? Okay, just a few moves, but fair enough. Yeah, it happens to the best of us, missing mate in ones, mate in twos, mate in threes. So anyway, connect your rooks, castle, connect your rooks. You can do that. That's the thing that's kind of interesting is like you can do that against a really strong player, and you can do it before your opponent if you have the white pieces, right? Theoretically, if you have the white pieces, you're faster to do stuff. So go ahead and do it. All right, I'm gonna practice what I preach here. I'm gonna develop and fast, get my king to safety, and connect my rook. So we have an Italian. I am gonna defend this pawn, not go for the fried liver business that makes my head hurt. Just defend the pawn. Attack a pawn, defend a pawn. And then we're going to play c3 because we just want to keep our bishop here. So we're going to go c3. Or we can castle right away. We're going to castle right away. We don't have to wait on castling. Then normally you go c3, knight bd2, and so on, the Italian style. I'm going to start with a4. And the reason I'm going to start with a4 is because black has the option of playing d5 in one go if you start with c3. So sometimes you don't want to do that. All right, so rook e8. Interesting. I'm going to go c3 now. I don't love rook e8 simply because f7 looks a little tender. So knight g5 could be dangerous. Queen e3 can be dangerous. I'm not a huge fan of that. So a6, okay. I'm going to go b4. Normally this expansion is not happening so early in these structures, but because rook e8 happened, I want to play queen b3. I want to tuck the queen and the bishop behind on the diagonal here. And the point is now d5, which is again one of black's ideas in the structure, is going to be hard to accomplish. And yeah, queen e7. I have knight g5 as an option if I want it. I also have bishop g5 pinning as an option. So many interesting options, honestly. This is why the Italian is so popular. It's flexible and there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm gonna go for the pin. The pin looks most menacing and scary, and it's not always easy to meet. A lot of times h6 g5 becomes the plan to push the bishop away, but it's requires a great deal of bravery, especially because there's no way to block out the pin if white decides to sack a piece on g5. And we spoke about piece sacrifices earlier with the piece for two pawns thing. But if I have two pawns in an attack, it could be kind of scary. So I'm playing knight b2, connecting my rooks. Bishop e6 is an excellent decision, neutralizing the pressure on this diagonal. So very good decision by by black. And now I have to decide, do I want to take? Do I not? I'm going to play a5 and keep the tension, take more space. Very interesting position. Very interesting position. h6. Now I'm going to do something counterintuitive and go bishop e3. And the idea is I'm not so sure the piece sacrifice made a lot of sense. So instead, I'm not going to sacrifice the piece, and I'm just going to argue that the space gained on the queen side here matters. Also, if bishop takes d3 here, not only is there knight takes a3 looking at f5 and d5, there's also f takes e3, which becomes a really, really dangerous idea, actually, and doubling on the f file. And I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try and demonstrate that it is a dangerous idea. Because knight h4 to f5 becomes kind of scary looking. Knight takes e3 was definitely the safer choice, and I think I might have gone for that in a normal game just for the safety. But it's also interesting to kind of demonstrate why a lot of players do welcome the double e pawns. A lot of times black will have the double e pawns. If bishop takes c6, f takes e6, same thing. And because white gets, or the side that gets the half open file gets to play on that side. So queen e6, maybe preparing d5 makes some sense. I'm gonna go knight h4. Can I go knight h4? I would like to go knight h4, so I'm gonna do it. Again, eyeing this f5 square. d5 makes a lot of sense. I need to take this one. Queen takes d5. Okay. Not a bad decision, actually, because d3 is hanging, and that's actually a huge issue. A huge issue. So I actually have to take the time to defend it, which might suggest that my whole plan to begin with is not that impressive. We will find out shortly. I really like to double the F pawns, but Akash is reacting pretty well from the standpoint that when normally if one side's playing on the flank, you want to try and play in the middle. And the point is that you create distractions. E4 is again, another very interesting move. The idea is that if I take, my structure sucks, so I can't really do that. I'm going to go d4 and keep the structure intact for now. I do like, though, that if I do manage to trade the queens under good circumstances, my pawns might rumble. Oh, g5, that's right as I was praising the play. G5 is a bridge too far because the knight is loose on f6. And yeah, you do get the piece back, but there's just too much. The king is too exposed now for this to work, candidly. So I'm going to double the rooks on the f file, as was the plan all along. And then, yeah, I think rook takes f7 is a threat. Rook takes h6 is a threat. So, man, Akash had a really nice position, promising position going there. All right, so queen e5. This pin is annoying me. I'm going to go rook f. Sorry, rook. I was going to say rook f5. That doesn't mean anything. Rook 1 f5, pushing the queen away. And then now I still have the options to take on h6, but I got that out of my face. So rook takes here, and then rook g5 is a threat. And yeah, rook g5. And now the queen is going to be gone. So I'll take that. I'll take on h4. I'll bring the queen back into position to do some things. And now should be checkmate into 1 and then 2. Whoa! What do you mean I won 2? I just blundered my queen. Holy cow, I need to pay attention. All right, now this is actually an interesting opportunity. Can black win up a rook? We'll find out. It's not the easiest thing to do, honestly. I do think I'm gonna survive this one. I believe. Yeah, uh, I'm gonna win this one, unfortunately. Not that I deserved it. Um, but it was adventurous. But knights are really tricky in Blitz, especially if you're down on the clock. Um, Knights are tricky, so I'm just being a little tricky with my knight, and it's on such a nice outpost. Um, can I explain that misadventure? No. Um, am I fortunate that it worked out? Yes. And now I'm gonna push my pawns on the queen side. I didn't deserve that one though. It's a shame. All right, let me take a. I need to take some deep breaths. There was some trauma there. Okay, now we're back. We're back. The pawns will go, and one of these pawns is going to become a queen. I'm not sure which one. That's the question. And there aren't any stalemating ideas because there is a F pawn. So as long as the F pawn is there, there should be okay. All right, so last time I said there was mate in two, it wasn't mate in two. So I'm gonna double check this time. Rook A1 check, Rook A2, Rook takes A2 is mate. Okay. Rook A1, Rook A2, Rook takes A2. Okay, I did it. Okay. What a relief. Again, sometimes chess blindness exists all at every level. Now, what happened there? What had happened was, as the kids say. So I won the queen, and then I said there was mate in two, and I quite simply did not see that the rook on e7 could capture my queen. Isn't that crazy? What it means is that it wasn't mate in two. And what it means is that there would have been some more adventures to before delivering checkmate. But fortunately, we're able to navigate those adventures. I do think early on, rook e8 is a no-no because in this structure, the f7 pawn is so loose that normally, if you're going to play for rook e8, it's because you already played bishop e6 or something, or queen e7, something to that effect, where the bishop on c4 is challenged a little bit more than it was. So just the rook e8 business as early as it was is not my cup of tea, even if it is playable. Um, One thing I also will show just because is there are some lines I've seen before where after rook e8, white goes knight g5, and after rook f8 back, there's some king h1 idea, and after h6, f4. And I've seen these kind of lightning attacks like this, where all of a sudden it becomes very dangerous because there's so much pressure on the king that there's something like this happens where there's a pawn that gets to g6, there's a mating idea, and there's a pin. So those were also in the back of my head. And it just, again, I think it's a little bit, rook e8 makes those ideas more relevant. So don't play rook e8, continue to develop and connect your rooks first, get those pieces out, then consider making moves with the rooks. All right, on to the next. Akash played very well for though very very well for 700. Was in the game for a while, so shout out to Akash. All right, the polar bear, E4. So any requests we did Sicilian, we did Caro-Kann. We didn't do the French or E5. So if I don't hear something in Sicilian in 10 seconds, I'll play. Oh, the perk. Oh wow. The perk. Okay, we'll play the perk. So the perk on principle I don't love as an opening just because you give up all the space from the jump. And the stronger you get, the more you realize space really is a thing that matters, honestly. The polar bear is playing knight c3. That is the correct way. d5 is early, though. Honestly, in so many positions in the perk, black will actually play knight c6 and then knight b8 back just to provoke d5. So the fact that I'm getting it for free without playing it does does make me happy. Um, White is still fine though. White has more space, but the d5 move is a little too early because now I am going to be able to break down your center with c6, and it's going to happen soon. So yeah. So I also see some Petroff and Kid recommendations. So h3 trying to stop me from this pin. I wasn't going to anyway because I like my bishops. So I wasn't going to trade bishop for knight there. Although many perk players are happy to trade this bishop for this knight and then argue that some of the dark squares in the center are a little bit weaker. So not my cup of tea, but definitely someone's cup of tea. All right, bishop b3. I'm going to go b5 now. Or sorry, bishop c4. I'm going to go b5 now. I like the tempo on the bishop. I like that I can go b4 next. And yeah, maybe this pawn e4 is already loose. Knight takes e4 looks promising. So knight takes e4, d takes c6. If I recapture again, there's bishop d5, which would fork these two. So I gotta be a little bit careful. So I'm gonna take on e4, but I don't think I'm gonna take on c6 because of this bishop d5 trick. I think I might play knight c5 first and hit the bishop. Although, okay, actually, I can still do it. Yeah, I like knight c5. I also like bishop b7, but I like knight c5. I like getting rid of this bishop. This bishop is a nice piece. We've already sung the praises of bishops before, and yeah, it's a nice piece. There's also ideas of playing a5, a4, and expanding, but I really want to finish developing my queenside pieces. All right, so c4 makes this bishop on b3 pretty bad, actually. So now there's an argument to keep the bishop there. So now I'm just sounding all manner of contradictory. But I kind of do want to take on c3. Why do I want to take? Because it keeps my bishop open, but I don't have to take. So what am I going to do? I'm going to take. The reason I'm going to take is I don't like this pawn on d5 staying there forever because in certain lines, I didn't like a knight d4, knight c6 dynamic. So yeah. So I'm going to take this bishop. I mean, I can't help it. I just like these bishops. Um, and then, yeah, queen b3 makes sense. Um, but now I'm going to go c5. And the idea is I have this nice long pawn chain here, almost in the style of a Benko, actually, uh, and or a dragon. And then I'm going to try to play on the half open b file, all while being a pawn up. So this pawn d5 is a little bit loose. There's a little bit of looseness to white's position. So bishop e3. I'm gonna go bishop a6. It's a nice tempo on the rook on f1, and then knight d7. And if bishop g5 hits the pawn e7 twice, I have knight f6 to block. So queen c2. There's rook b8 is also an idea here. I'm gonna start with knight f6, just keeping an eye on the d5 pawn. And it's literally a Benko structure, truly a Benko. This is a Benko Gambit structure. The rook will come to b8, looking at the b2 pawn. If b3, I can even go bishop c8, f5 like that to hit the queen at some point. I like the bishop here for now, but maybe that will change. Uh, hmm. Yeah, I'm going to go queen a5. I always think twice before having my queen leave the king side, but really the play in this is usually about the queen side. So bishop d2, nice move, hitting my queen and looking at the e7 pawn. I'm going to bring my queen back to c7 to defend that one. Bishop g5 makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go bishop. No, I'm not. I'll go rook e8 just to defend the e7 pawn, overprotect it for the time being. And Polar Bear is defending very well. This is not a good position for white at all, but defending well. All right, giving me that bishop for the knight, though, does help me a little bit. I'm not going to give you my bishop because if you've learned anything so far, you know that bishops are valuable. So I'm not just giving them up. And these bishops exert tremendous influence in the center. And the queen side. So essentially, I have a lot of squares under lock and key. So knight d2 tries to look at the c4 square control. I'm going to go rook b4. Is that okay? Yeah, I think it is. And think about interrogating that side of the board. And now I'm going to take this one. And the reason I'm going to take is because I have rook b2 to follow. And that's a very active rook, like a very active rook. Queen a4 does hit my rook, but I can follow with rook b8 and double. And I have really nice control everywhere. Rook b1 just hangs a rook, though, I think. I'm like double checking everything now. But rook takes b1 is good and free. And yeah. Now, one thing I would advise, honestly, when you're in a winning position, don't allow checks. Like, if you can avoid it, it's always just kind of a nice thing to not allow checks. So I'm not going to even allow queen e8. Like, I don't have to. So why am I going to? Now I'm going to give a check there. In the spirit of not allowing checks, I'm going to go king g7 before I move my queen away. And then queen f5 hits this knight on e4. And again, just trying not to allow checks so that I can get checkmate. Good game, Polar Bear. Really, really interesting game. You had me with the space here. The space taking advantage of the perk was great. Just develop your knights first, and then develop the bishop, and then castle. And I think again, what we're seeing in game after game so far is okay. This one actually, white did connect their rooks first, but the reason why it didn't matter as much here is because they kind of blundered it along the way. So the challenge is to connect your rooks and keep the material level at the same time along the way, and that's not an easy thing to do at all. But if you manage to do that, you're in a very, very, very well suited to have a good middle game, and that's what we're trying to aim for. So good game. Just got to get out of the opening a little bit cleaner. So, on to the next. All right, so the Silent Assassin. Okay, so I've played all of these moves, all of those moves. So now I guess we're back to third rank moves. So I'll go e3. e5, d4. Okay, is this going to be like a reverse French? Exchange French? Okay, it is. It is. All right, so we have an exchange French on our hands. And I'm going to play it with c4. It's a little bit more ambitious than the bishop d3, bishop d6 copycat dynamic. But it's an interesting setup. Very interesting setup. I'm saying, please give me an isolated pawn, but in return, I get lots of activity in the form of open development. Is knight b4 a threat here? Threatening knight c2 with forking stuff? Looks a little scary. But is it a problem? I don't know. So c takes d5, knight takes d5. Let's just see what happens. Let's have a few more misadventures. I think knight b4, bishop b5 check is annoying. So that was the initial thought. And if c6, I could take on c6 and then play bishop a4. Who knows? Who knows? It doesn't feel like knight b4 is working. So knight d5. Okay, I saw that. And then I'm just going to go bishop c4, put more pressure on the knight. And yes, I have an isolated pawn, but I have really active pieces, and that counts for something. It really does. So that's what I was aiming for, and we'll see where it goes. So knight takes e3, b takes e3. I think black should have tossed in queen e7 check first, because it would have been annoying to block with any bishop here. Now it's easy to block because the knight on d5 is not taking on e3. So if you actually played the check a moment ago, I might have had to play king f1 to justify the setup, which is not the end of the world, but it would have been annoying. All right, so bishop d6 here. Okay. It's giving Petroff vibes, actually. This looks very, very similar to a Petroff, like too similar, like maybe it transposed, because this is the same exact structure you get into Petrov after castles. Um, Not sure how I feel about that. White has space in the center, but a slightly mangled pawn structure. So queen e7 is that's trying to castle queenside? No. So I'm gonna go rook e1 check because this king is still in the center. So some piece is gonna have to block on the e file, and I don't think you feel good about any of them. King f8 also was an option, but so knight e7, okay, but why is this? This doesn't feel. My alarm bells are going off because this shouldn't work. There's too much loose stuff here. So knight e5 is an option. It wins the bishop pair right away because bishop takes f7 is the issue. Uh, that looks like a very promising option, actually. There's also more interesting options like knight h4, but knight e5 looks pretty legit. So we're going to go for it. When in doubt, jump to the center. Rook takes e5, makes sense. The other move that was interesting was knight g5, looking at f7 that way. And it might have been actually better, but we don't have time for such long things. So castles, and yeah, this I saw, and I was looking at bishop a3 as a move. Bishop a3 looks at the knight on e7, kind of a pin. Nice development. Look at these bishops. These are like this is like the bishop pair from hell. I mean, look at these. And then if the rook moves, maybe there's some queen b3 dynamic or queen f3. Yeah, so rook e8, so queen, you know something. Yeah. Bishop takes f7 almost works. It almost doesn't count for much, I know, but it almost does work. So queen b3 or queen f3, which one? Hmm. Queen b3 or queen f3? I think you got to go b3. You look at f7 and you look at b7. What's not to like? What's not to like, my friends? So really, these bishops are doing great, and I think this is a really good example of why the bishop pair can be really strong and effective because you could see just how much energy is here. Now I can take on b7, or I can play rook e1 and add more pressure. More pressure. Hmm. I like more pressure, but I also like pawns. I'm gonna take on b7. I'm gonna be greedy for once in my life. And the point is that now it's not just about winning that pawn, it's about the structure being mangled on the queen side. So it's actually really hard to cover these pawns long term now, the c7 and the a7 pawn. So um yeah. So we have promise. There's promise here. So knight c6. Hmm. Can I take that too? I'm going to. And then I wanted to go bishop b5 and pin. Can I do that? I don't think there's back rank problems as long as my rook is covering. And my bishop. So my back rank is secure, although it would feel a lot better if I had like h3, h4, and on the board. Okay. So now I'm going to give a check here and take advantage of the back rank issues. And then I'm going to take. And yeah, this is a piece up. Now I will take care of my back rank before any other oversights happen. And we're going to push the A pawn home. A4. A5. Defend the bishop on C6 and then go A6. A7. All right. Good game, Silent Assassin. I actually did think there was one critical moment here. I mentioned it during the game, which was when, uh, what happened? When I played knight C takes d5, bishop C4, I think queen E7 was actually good here, and I'm going to check. Yeah, queen E7 was good here. Queen E7 was the best move. So because queen E7 was the best move and a good move there, I actually shouldn't rush to take on d5, but it was very tempting. And the reason it was tempting is because I was worried about knight b4. So if I do something like weird, like let's say I go h3, knight b4 wins because there's just this fork here. So I needed to be able to meet the knight b4 threat with castling, which is why I took and then played bishop c4, because now if you go knight b4, I can just castle. And knight c2 does not have the same effect if my king is safe. I can move my rook away. I can, then play in the center. It just doesn't work the same way. The computer's telling me, strangely enough, that I should play c5 here. Maybe it's not so strange, because now knight b4 doesn't work because queen a4 check does win the knight, because the bishop is no longer, covering it because of the pawn on c5's in the way. So that's an interesting nuance. I'm not a huge fan of releasing tension, and that's why I missed that. So hopefully you're getting insight into why I didn't like the move, but I can see why it makes sense. So yeah. All right. I think we have a few games left because we are at close to the 2 hour point. So I think we have a few games left, and we'll start with Youssef. So Youssef is asking for e4. Is playing e4. And someone did say Petroff before, so if knight f3 happens, I will play a Petroff. And the Petroff has a reputation of it being like a kind of boring line, but it actually, a lot of Petroff games become quite sharp because of ambition. So you play d6 first to take and then you take the pawn. Now, queen e2, this is probably one of the more boring lines, the Petroff, because I have to play queen e7 to defend the knight because d3 was a threat. But even here, these games can become quite interesting. And I'll just refer you, there's a game in the candidates. It was between, actually, I think it might have been between Fabiano with a white. I know, maybe it was Kramnik with white, and Fabiano Caruana with black. And it was a very fascinating Petrov game with the queens off early that became very interesting. All right, so knight c3. I'm going to go a6 here, stopping this knight b5 jump that happens in a lot of these positions. And I'm going to play in a very interesting way, hopefully. I'm not going to play it in the way where it's 100% symmetrical, if I have my druthers. So I'm going to castle. I'm going to go knight bd7 again, just kind of breaking the symmetry just a little bit and not putting the pieces exactly where white's pieces are. And then I want to go rook e8 and bishop f8 and so on. But you can see a6 was helpful because it stops knight b5. So, all right, so b3. All right, so they're trying to put the bishop on this long diagonal. Makes sense. I'm going to play rook e8, get my rook to the open file. There's nothing wrong with that. I also can play d5 at the right moment, and the right moment might be now-ish, given that Now I'm going to play bishop f8. If the bishop went to b2, I would have gone d5. Here it's not so great because bishop f4 hits my c7 pawn, and I wasn't so thrilled about that. Although actually d5, bishop f4, there was bishop b4. All right, so now I actually do like d5 a lot. Although the problem is my knight isn't in the way. So again, I think I've said more than once that beginning aggressive operations when you haven't finished your development is kind of not ideal. So I'm gonna get my rooks connected before I do anything crazy. And b5 takes a little bit more space on the queen side, so it's not a bad move. a3, bishop b7. All right, so now my rooks are connected. Now I can do some interesting, frisky things, but important to connect my rooks first. Uh, so h3, that makes some sense. Should I go h6? Yeah, I'm gonna go h6. Solving my back rank is not a bad thing. I'm really just trying to see what white is trying to do. Very equalist position, but honestly, if you had to choose, you'd choose black for two reasons. One, because my rook is not obstructed by the file, like, oh, well, that changed right now. I was going to say, one, because the bishop was not obstructing the open file, and two, because of the space on the queen side. I can play bishop takes f3 here now, and that's a really double-edged choice, because it's giving out the bishop pair, but it also feels good, because that makes all the pawns weak. So yeah, I'm going to take on f3. But now that my light squares are weak, I'm going to do something that I hopefully will be somewhat instructive. I think I need to play something like c6, d5 quickly and cover those weak squares up. If I go knight e5 right away, there's bishop g2, which threatens f4. Yeah, we're going to go knight e5 right away. And then after bishop g2, maybe there's knight g6. Very interesting. All right, so king g2 I also saw. And I wasn't as impressed because I thought there's some knight g6 or even knight h5 idea aiming at the f4 square. Because my light squares are a little bit sensitive, I'm going to start with c6, which takes some of the sting out of a potential knight d5. Yeah, so knight e4, I saw that. And now I'm going to play knight h5, not trading and undoubling the pawns, but putting more pressure on the dark squares. So just playing around on the dark squares a little bit seems to be the way to go. Now these pawns are doubled. There's some sensitivity here. Is it a lot? No. Is it something? Yes. So a6 makes a lot of sense. Trying to open up a little bit. I'm going to go knight g6 and aim at knight h4 check. I can trade a pair of rooks. The threats are still the same. Actually, I should have played knight h4 check first. That was actually an oversight by me. I could have played knight h4 check right away. And I'm glad I'm getting a second opportunity at it because this is a really important pawn. The king can't step forward because of the g3, it's just the g3 square is covered. So this is a hugely important pawn. And now rook e3. I'm going to go knight h4 back. Knight g3. I don't want to trade and fix the structure, so I'm going to go knight f4. It's weird. Both the rooks are staring each other down. It's a very weird looking dynamic. All right, so one of them gets traded. I'm a pawn up, but also the structure is mangled, which is nice. I'm going to bring this knight back here to protect the other one, and I'd love to get in d5 and hit that rook on e4. Because now, this rook on d4 looks not long for the world, and c5 traps it. So now I'm up in exchange, which is nice, and converting this one is all about finding the weaknesses in the position. This is weak, this is weak. So the rook for sure needs to come in and take advantage of that. And then I'm going to take that one. And then f2 is also loose. So I'll take that one. And then I'll take the rook on the bishop on f1. And there are some checkmating patterns around. They're not quite there yet, but they're coming. The knight on f5 is loose. Bishop d6 is a check I like. I know the knight on d4 is hanging, but I don't need to take it just yet. Rook f2 is another check. I'll take that. And now I'll give another check, bring the bishop to g3. And now I need the knight to come to f3 to set up the rook h2 mate pattern. I think it's called an Arabian mate when the rook and the knight checkmate the king in the corner. I think it's called the Arabian mate. So knight f3 and then rook h2. And I don't need the bishop. Great. So that was an interesting game. Very symmetrical Petroff, but it just kind of goes to show that really symmetrical positions, there's a lot of life left in the game. And I think really where it went wrong here was this bishop f1, the doubling of the pawns, allowing the doubling of the pawns is a huge responsibility. It's actually not it's not a bad idea per se to allow this, but it just creates a lot of added risk and stress and responsibility. And so for me, I relish the idea of playing against that structure because it means you really have to use your bishops well and be very active to make it work. And curling into a ball with king g2 wasn't it. So the move here after 95 had to be bishop g2. And then there's maybe some play with f4 hitting the rook and so on, but otherwise it's just a bad structure. So, all right, I think this is going to be the last game of this session. So let's make it count. But I just say before the game, thanks in advance for being here, for showing up, and yeah, hopefully you learned something. So, all right, I'm gonna play b3. I'm gonna play Larson's attack. So bishop e2, e5. Okay, that's what you're supposed to do. Knight c6, e3. So far, so good. d5, taking the center. We like that. So far, so good from our opponent, Imoful here. Knight f6. That is a... I don't know if they realize bishop takes e5 is a threat. So, because I was pinning this knight, so now I'm going to do it. And you have a whisker of compensation because you still have space in the center. You could get the bishop pair if you want to right now by playing something like a6 or bishop d7. But the problem is that is an important pawn. So now there is actually a line. Maybe I'll even show you after the game. It's one of my it's my secret weapon against b3, and it's really good. It's really good. Like I've analyzed it pretty well, and it's relatively new. Maybe I'll show you right after the game what it is. All right, so again, black has not done anything wrong except losing the pawn. That's a big deal because it's a central pawn. Everything else black has done is fine. So it's incumbent upon me now to take advantage of that by playing in the center and so on. But yeah, pawn is a pawn. Yeah, I need a drink saying easy free pawn. Yeah, pawn is a pawn for sure. All right, so I'm gonna play knight c3, getting the last vestiges of inactivity out of my position. H6 is a really nice move, stopping knight g5 in some positions. That is, I mean, black is playing well. I just want to point this out. Black is playing pretty well given the circumstances. All right, so I'm going to take the center. And you might say, "What d4? You're weak. You're blocking in your bishop." Yeah, but I'm taking space. Space matters. So 97. Okay, so 97 was the first really, really, really big mistake because this bishop now has no oxygen after move c5, and now this bishop on d6 is just trapped. And yeah, that's gonna hurt a little bit. So instead, probably was better maybe to play bishop f8 or something like that before bringing the knight around. But I get why you did that. And I think the funny thing is, or the interesting thing is, I think a lot of times when you see a strong player play, it's like how did they see this weird thing so quickly, right? Like how did they see by the way, I'm not even going to take it right away because I don't need to rush, but it's like, how did they see the tactics so quickly? How did they see the move so quickly? It's not actually because they're calculating so much, although there are people that are good at that. um it's because something looks different, or looks different than normal. And so for me, it was like, I've never seen the bishop on d6, the knights like that. There must be something wrong with it. And that's when you notice that there's something wrong with it, or you feel that there's something wrong with it, then you're like, oh, let me start looking. And then you just stumble upon that thing. So a lot of times it's you find something in the position that's different than what is normal, and then you try to kind of figure out what that is. So it's like it's like it's like if you have like it's like if someone was in your house, and you're like, wait, why are they wait, what's the analogy? It's like you came back from vacation and things aren't where they're supposed to be. And you're just like, what's going on? You're like, someone was here. And it's a scary thing to happen, but you're like, oh, there must be something up. So, all right. So I promised I'd show the line, or I suggest I would, so I will show it, and I'll show it from the black perspective. So B3, uh, B3, E5. This is good. Knight C6. This is good. Like Mo full played. This is all makes sense. And after E3, there's this really cool line with D5. And after D5, again, this has been played very rarely. I think you can't even find many games in the database like this. So this is serious prep. Um, After Bishop B5, the pawn is under attack. You can actually play this move Knight E7. And the point is, yeah, take the pawn. Okay, if you don't take the pawn, then black just has more space. But the idea is that after bishop takes e5, you go a6, you hit the bishop on b5. They have to take now because of the pin. If they move the bishop away, the pin is gone. So then they take on c6, you take back with the knight. And now you have the bishop pair, and you have a tempo on this other bishop. They have to go move this bishop now, so they can go to g3 or to b2. And if they go to g3, you play h5. And you're threatening to now trap that bishop on g3 with h4, and it's a very, very dangerous setup. If they go h3, you go h4 anyway. And if the bishop moves, then you have queen g5, and you're hitting the pawn on g2. And basically the point is you get all this really nice energetic position for just the cost of a pawn, and it's very similar to a French, because they might even have to play something like king f1 here. And if you go back a few moves, and instead of going to g3, they went to b2, you can still go queen g5 now, and the pawn in g2 is a little bit loose. And if they just play g3 to defend the pawn, look at that Swiss cheese there. So you're arguing that you're pawn down, but you have the bishop pair, and you have a control in the center. And a lot of times you can castle queenside on one of the next few moves. So it's like 10 times better than a Stafford Gambit. So something to think about. So next time you play against, well, the thing is now that I've shown you this prep, you're gonna play this really, really unusual and good line against b3. You're gonna play d5, and then you're gonna play, instead of knight f6, you're gonna play knight e7, and after takes a6, and you're gonna get this position as a 1200 or 1300. And they're gonna be like, uh-oh, fair play alert. This is really good. This is really good. Because I've analyzed it extensively with the computer. Okay. I think that's something to consider. I think you ought to maybe give it a go, and maybe B3 won't be a problem anymore. I think we're at the end of the road here, Ajay. What do you think?
There. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kassa. It was awesome to as usual, let's say. I think like everyone loves your comments. Even like for me it's very instructive. I'm watching, actually, like not producing, but like watching your game. So thank you so much, because I'm learning, and like I'm sure that the whole chat is learning a lot. So thank you. And
Well, it's always fun to do it, so appreciate it. Hopefully everyone enjoys their Halloween. Ajay, did you have any Any costume or Halloween situation going
I'm
on where you
supposed
are?
to be a sort of ghost, but like at first I was supposed to be like this the Joker, and then like a ghost, and then I didn't know, and it was like whatever, like all together. And I'm doing now in a stream actually in my channel. By the way, tomorrow we will have an arena tournament celebrating the 50K members in the community club, and next.
Hey.
Yay! Yes, so it's getting bigger and it's going to be like the biggest social place where we can share chess and a lot of things there in chess.com. So we will celebrate with Arena Tournament, and next week we will have the Variants Tournament, the Sarah one. I don't know if you know how to play that, but like it's very cool and it's going to be there, the Community Championship.
All right, so
So,
folks, stay tuned. There's a lot going on, and definitely join us for some of our other events.
yeah. Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you, Kassa. See you.
Bye.
Bye.